I must confess, I had not heard about Netflix's new massive budget sci-fi action movie, The Electric State, until the day before yesterday when I watched a video about it from Disparu. He's got a great channel, great analysis. You're probably already subscribed to him. If you're not, subscribe to him. But in his video, he discusses the low Rotten Tomatoes critics score and then assumed that the film was going to be bad as a result of that. It's a Russo brothers movie, incidentally, and surprisingly one of the biggest budget movies of all time. And yet, it's not like this was billed as the next Avatar or something. How come the promotion for this movie has been so low-key that I hadn't even heard of it until a couple of days ago? Maybe I live under a rock, I don't know. It is getting a limited theatrical release, incidentally, but for the most part, this is primarily a streaming movie on Netflix. Now, Disparu makes the comment that if this film is deemed a massive critical failure, then it doesn't really bode well for the MCU resurrection that fans hope will take place with the return of the Russo brothers for Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. Fair enough, except a couple of days later, I checked the Rotten Tomatoes score and saw, what is so often the case these days, a massive disparity between critic and audience scores for The Electric State. When I checked it, audience scores were at 70%, but this morning I awake to find they've increased to 76%, which isn't bad at all. And that's from more than 500 ratings compared to the critic score of 16% from only 81 reviews. So last night I fired up the Netflix machine and decided to give it a watch. And much to my surprise, it was actually terrible. Okay, seriously, it was actually far better than I expected. Though my expectations were very low, it has to be said. But I would go so far as to say it was pretty decent, actually. Not great, but certainly entertaining enough. Now, I'm going to get more into this review in a moment, but the first thing to say is this film had a budget of $320 million, and I cannot for the life of me see $320 million on screen. I mean, to be fair, I don't think any movie should cost north of $200 million, especially when you consider that most of these CGI-heavy films are just made by digital artists sitting at computers, animating wireframe models, chroma keying actors on green screen sets, and adding textures to things. But I've already discussed how financially wasteful Hollywood can be. Now, I also knew nothing about the 2018 graphic novel on which this film is based. It's based on a graphic novel called The Electric State by Simon Stollenhag. So I really was going into this blind. The film stars Millie Bobby Brown as Michelle Green, the sister of Christopher, who was apparently killed in a car accident and who has taken the form of a robot named Cosmo. Also, Chris Pratt is in the film, playing what Chris Pratt usually plays, a variant of Peter Quill, that kind of guy. In this film, his character is called John Keats. Stanley Tucci plays the central villain, Ethan Skate, CEO of the Center organization, which was key in developing human-controlled robots that defeated the robot uprising some years ago, because there was a war between humans and robots. And now he runs a virtual world entertainment network that humans vegetate in all day with VR headsets on their heads, kind of like Ready Player One, but much, much worse. By the way, this is basically a kids' movie, which became apparent as I was watching it, probably within the first 10 to 15 minutes. It's a family movie. It's kind of like Ready Player One meets Toy Story. The story setting and world building are actually very good, setting the film in an alternate 1990s where, some years ago, humans developed robots to do our manual labor for us. But the robots got fed up of being our slaves, rebelled, and there was a war, and a lot of people died. But humanity did win, and the robots have been shoved off into a walled-off remote region of the western United States. Michelle is an orphan who is one day visited by a robot in the form of the cartoon character Cosmo, a favourite of herself and her brother. The robot is kind of like Bumblebee from Transformers. He can only speak in the catchphrases of the cartoon character, but he does successfully communicate to her that her brother is alive, and he's controlling the robot. So she and Cosmo undertake a perilous journey into the robot Mad Max zone to try to track down a doctor who knows where Christopher is. They meet a smuggler, played by Pratt, and also his robot Herman, played by Anthony Mackie. Meantime, they're being hunted by Colonel Bradbury, played by Giancarlo Esposito. Eventually, the film gets to that point where the ragtag ensemble of would-be heroes are established, and they go off on their journey. They're captured by a colony of robots living in a shopping mall, led by Mr. Peanut, a robot Mr. Peanut, played by Woody Harrelson. They soon learn that the doctor they're trying to find is the same doctor who found Christopher after the accident. Christopher was going to die, but for some reason Christopher's brain was super special or something, and it had the intelligence to run the entire center network. This isn't really expanded upon, but whatever, we just have to go with it. If the network doesn't keep going, everyone attached to it will die. It's kind of like turning off the Matrix, basically. Everyone in the Matrix would die. Meantime, instabilities are happening in the network because Christopher is controlling Cosmo in the real world. Skate orders Bradbury to capture him, which he does, up until the time when Bradbury witnesses the full scale of Skate's cruelty. The typical henchman who turns on the main villain because he's gone too far cliché. In fact, the film is filled with clichés and predictable moments throughout. There's so many elements of the movie that you feel very familiar with. There's not an awful lot of originality here, outside of the central concept. A big battle ensues in Seattle between the robots and the center machines. Michelle has a final moment with her brother in a virtual world where she has no choice but to turn off his machine and let him die. This reminded me a lot, actually, of the ending of Star Trek Picard Season 1, where Picard has to unplug Data from his machine and let him die. Again, just the film seems to be full of moments that we've seen before in other films. Once this happens, all of the human machines are deactivated, kind of like the ending of The Phantom Menace, or any other movie where all the armies of bad guys just stop working or get switched off because the central power system / bad guy is deactivated. Our heroes have won, and the film ends after some emotional rah-rah speech by Michelle and some nice music and maybe a subtle hint that something of Christopher lives on. The film is a strange one for me. It doesn't technically do an awful lot wrong. It's just predictable. The CGI, I will say, is actually good, except for maybe one or two background shots at the end where you can kind of tell a little bit where it really did feel like it was just green screened. The main villain isn't developed enough. We get one scene where he's in a virtual world with a VR simulation of his mother, and there's a small bit about how she was abusive, but we really needed to see more from him in terms of his backstory. It's just not developed. Also, we needed to understand the sheer scale of just how much humanity has been captured by this VR center world. It's not fully clear just how many people are enslaved and addicted to this virtual reality. What was good and what I appreciated, because it's one of the themes of my new book, The Checkmate Machine, How Modern Smart Tech Ruins Everything, available from the links below from Amazon, is the theme that humanity needs to unplug from technology and make real human physical connections rather than virtual ones in cyberspace. In other words, get out and touch grass from time to time. That's very good advice for those of us who live chronically online lives. The Electric State isn't a bad movie. I think it was better than Captain America Brave New World, actually, a lot better. I mean, you do have to acknowledge that the target audience for The Electric State is families and kids. It's not a serious sci-fi action movie. Performances are decent across the board. There was one or two minor laughs in there. I will say that the film could have done with being a good deal funnier, though. But the biggest issue that the film has, aside from fairly predictable plot progression and cliches, is that it cost $320 million to make, which makes this one of the most expensive films of all time. And it's just a Netflix movie. And for that kind of money, it should have been something groundbreaking. I mean, the story should have been far superior and much more original. And that's the reason I believe The Electric State is a creative failure more than anything else. Having said that, if you're expecting much, you're going to be disappointed. If, on the other hand, you have low expectations, you probably won't be. And if you've got a quiet evening and you've got kids and they're looking for something new to watch, I think you could do a lot worse than this film. They'll probably be entertained for the 2-hour runtime, but adults are going to quickly forget this movie after watching it. Those are my thoughts on The Electric State. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this video. It means a great deal and it helps to promote my channel as well. Take care, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.